Android Dialogues, where we have bite-sized conversations with people from the Android community. I'm Chuki Chen, and today we're chatting with
Margaret Maynard-Reid.
Hello, Margaret.
Hi, Chuki.
Where are you based and what do you do?
I'm based in Seattle, and I'm an Android developer at a mobile consulting company called General UI.
Okay. And you also teach, you told me?
Yes, I also teach at the University of Washington.
Great. And how do you get started as an Android developer?
In 2012, I took a class, a certificate program from the University of Washington. It was a 8-month program teaching you how to do Android development, and that's how I got started.
Oh, so at that point you were doing something different as your job and you did it as a side?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so I did it as a side at night for 8 months.
Okay.
And I really like it. I created an app called Tiny Peppers with my Chinese recipes.
Oh, cool. So I find very interesting to hear about how people learn Android, especially there's a lot of people there who are very interested to become an Android developer. So since you yourself retrained and you are also teaching Android, maybe you can give some tips on how do you become an Android developer? Not you, but other people. Like what advice would you give them if they want to learn to write Android apps?
Sure. There are lots of good resources out there to help you to become an Android developer. For example, Udacity has good classes for either beginner developers or beginner Android developers, and then you can go further. And then Coursera also has it, and you can take other classes online or local from your universities.
So the Udacity courses, are those the ones created by Google, or there are more than? Because I only know the ones that are created by Google. There was this one that go through the Sunshine app, and is that the one that you are referring to?
I actually went through that one as well.
Oh, okay.
Just to see how that compares to the UW curriculum.
Yeah.
But right now they have both the beginner class as well as intermediate and also advanced class, plus some other user interface
we'll
classes.
add it to the show notes then, because I wasn't quite sure what course you're talking about. But afterwards, I'll get the links from you, and then people can check those out. So you said Udacity and Coursera, and also your local universities.
Yes, like University of Washington, where I'm teaching the 8-month program.
Cool. And I am also very curious about when people first learn Android, what is the most difficult thing for them to understand? Because it's kind of different. For example, a lot of people I know, they go through boot camps and they learn web programming. And I feel like Android is a little bit more complex than web programming. So I'm curious, like during your teaching, like what do people kind of stumble to like the most, and how do you help them?
Getting started is actually one of the hardest steps for Android development. You mean
downloading Android Studio?
Android Studio and set up everything. And once you have the courage and get started, there's lots of free resources out there to do. And then another challenging thing is probably supporting the multiple screen sizes and the different API levels.
So in your UW curriculum, do you have like a module that focus on just that, like helping people get to work on different screen sizes and API levels and things like that?
Yes, the UW class has a program has actually 3 classes. Each lasts about 10 weeks long. The first class is teaching students about the fundamentals of Android, and the second class is about advanced UI, and then the third class is communications and the APIs, etc. So the second class, in the advanced UI class, students will learn about how to deal with different screen sizes.
Interesting. And I guess I should actually go back to the basics. Like, why are you teaching Android, right? Because I know a lot of developers out there, they write apps for themselves, for their companies, but they don't take that extra step and go teach other people. Like, because it's not even your full-time job. Like, why do you spend all this effort and go teach others?
Sure. As I said earlier, I started out as a student in 2012.
Right.
Since my day job was not development or Android development, I thought teaching will be a good way for me to learn. So I actually worked as a teaching assistant in 2013 and 2014, and sometimes when the instructors were absent, I had the opportunity to actually
step on stage and
to
actually do
substitute
it.
and teach, and the students really loved it. And I thought, oh, maybe I could become an instructor. And the program manager asked me to become an instructor in 2012, and that's how I started teaching as an instructor.
That's interesting that you mentioned you wanted to teach because you wanted to learn.
Yes.
Most people don't think of it that way. So can you kind of get into the specific of like what you learn as a teacher?
Sure. When I was working as a teaching assistant, people would ask questions online because we had both online and in-person students.
Right.
So when they ask all these questions, I have to answer the questions. So I need to either research or know the answer or find out the answer.
Right.
Now, as an instructor, I have to prepare for the teaching material. I have to do a lot of research. So I learned a lot of things that I don't know myself. Also, when you work as an Android developer during your day job, you may or may not deal with a particular part of Android, right? But as an instructor, you prepare for the lecture material. You have to be
Comprehensive
of every single corner, you have to understand. So it's a great way to learn.
That's interesting. I find a lot of parallel of what you are saying to what I do when I prepare talks. Because, for example, so I do a lot of espresso testing. That's not news to people. Like I've been posting a lot of blog posts about that. But when I want to give a talk, I need to have kind of an end-to-end complete story of this is why espresso is good at what it's doing and how it works and how do you write a test and actually lay it all out. Because sometimes when I am doing it, I just search online, copy and paste some code and it works, and then I just move on, right? I don't actually think about why you don't want to do it that way. Is there any other way of doing it better? What is this particular piece of knowledge in the whole scheme of like, okay, there are other ways to test, there are other ways to set things up. So when I prepare a talk, I do feel that I am learning more than just when I am writing the code. So I definitely see some parallels there. And speaking of speaking, you are going to be giving a talk at NDevCon, I believe.
Yes.
What is the topic that you're going to be talking about?
So the topic is how to persist data on Android with SQLite database and ContentProviders.
Yeah, I feel like, at least like when I first started, that was one topic that I tried to avoid. Because
a lot of developers do.
I look at the tutorial and I was like, are you kidding me? Like, how many functions do you want me to define? And it's just so complex, and I felt like if I can get away with not doing it, like I won't do it. Do you? So you see the same in your students?
Yes, actually, SQLite databases and ContentProviders is one of the toughest topics. Giving the feedback from my students, they said it's really difficult, especially to troubleshoot. When something goes wrong, it's not like you can debug and follow where the bug is.
So how will you troubleshoot? Like, what are the toolbox for debugging that?
So there are lots of good tools, but the two tools the main tool I use is actually SQLite 3.
Oh, the command line tool.
The command line tool that comes with the SDK.
Right.
So I use that one. You can also log your statements to see where it is. But when you use the SQLite 3, you can actually do ADB shell and then SQLite 3. You have to go to that folder where your database file is stored.
So do you need root to do that? Like,
yes.
Okay.
So it has to be running on the rooted device or emulator.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
But it's really nice for troubleshooting. You can actually see maybe some of your SQL statements are wrong or your schema is wrong as you defined.
Interesting. Because I've done that. The way I did it, which is different from the way you do it. You said you do an ADB shell and then just type the command.
Yeah.
I usually... It's also, you need a root device for that, but like I will pull it first and do it on my local shell, because then I can have scripts. I can copy and paste things, whereas I feel like in the ADB shell it's a little bit more limited. Like you don't have the full Linux command. Maybe you do. It just feels different because like my shell is set up in a certain way, I have my alias and whatnot. So I prefer to do it on my local machine rather than on the emulator.
Yeah, and then another way is you can use the SQLite Browser, which is a GUI that
I do not know that.
so that you can actually see your database. For that, you do need to pull your file out.
Okay.
You can either use the ADB command or you can use the File Explorer. From the Android device monitor, File Explorer, you go to data, and databases and find your database file. You pull it out, and then this is a SQLite Browser. You can also see the your database schema and tables. You can insert, delete records.
That's really powerful.
Yeah, I use that because my Tiny Peppers recipe app comes with a database, like a ready-made, pre-made database. So I use that GUI tool.
So if you do that, then do you ADB push it back on the device to use it?
So if you are just troubleshooting, you can pull the file and then see those things and push it back. Now with my app, I actually have the database under the assets folder. So when the app
you ship with
I ship with the database.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's a read-only database then, right? You don't write back during.
Yes, for that one it's read-only.
But you still use a content provider to read the content out of the database. That's very interesting. Well, hopefully, like your slides will be online once you give the talk, because I feel like this is just such an important topic that people keep avoiding, just because like it's complex and the value is not clear. Like if I can get away with just using shared preferences, I'll just do a key value pair and just put it in there.
Yeah. So actually, I last Wednesday I gave the talk as a dry run at our local meetup.
Oh, cool.
In Seattle, East Side Android, with about maybe 30 attendees, so that I can get their feedback and then before I give the talk at NDevCon. So yes, I know that some people will put everything in the shared preferences for persisting data.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I do is I actually use this open source library called Cupboard. So underlying is actually using SQLite, but the syntax is a lot more friendly and I don't have to do all the boilerplate.
Yeah.
So I would not recommend beginners to just jump right in, because I feel like understanding the basics is important. But for me, like I've done that once, like I know like you have to define all the different queries that links your content provider with the SQLite database. So I went through the whole exercise and then I was done. I just used the Cupboard library, which to me is they do all the kind of object translation and everything, rather than you have to go down to the column and the index and things like that. So I'll add that to the show notes as well. But people who have not done content provider should do that at least once, and then you can use the library.
Yes, definitely students who are learning.
Right.
I know a lot of developers will complain about the boilerplate codes for both the SQLite databases and content providers. Once you learn how they work, sure, you can use libraries. For example, the library called SQLBrite by Square.
Right.
And if you use RX Java, RX Android already, that's a nice one to use. And then there's you can also use greenDao. Some other libraries.
Well, when you go to that route, there's a lot of ORM as well. But I do believe that you should at least understand the basic principle before you move on to all these other tools. Because, like, for example, debugging, like if you don't know what happens behind the scene and when something goes wrong, then you are kind of lost. Like you don't have any way to figure out what's wrong. I do believe that you should do that at least once. So don't be afraid. You should learn the principles and it's actually not that complex. I just feel like it looks very complex just because when you look at the tutorial, it's really, really long.
Right.
So, cool. That's really cool. And I think that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much. And if people want to check out what you do, where they can find you on the internet?
They can follow me on Twitter at Margaret MZ.
Okay, we'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chucky.
Bye.
Bye.